All right, I'm here with Ashish Malik from B Vectoring Technologies. Ashish, thanks for taking the time to chat.
My pleasure. It's great to be here.
So we chatted before in December, actually. That was sort of an introduction. So if investors are curious about the story, I think they should go back and watch that interview, get a bit of an overview of the business, the technology behind it. It's pretty cool, I think, B Vectoring. But today I want to focus more on the future, the progress you've made since that interview. And so maybe talk first about the sales that you've achieved. I believe it was you said the Florida strawberry grower commercial sales the first time, but that's closed now. Can you talk about the progress that was had there, the results of those early sales?
Yeah, so when we had the conversation late last year, we had just received the EPA approval and just started the marketing process. And we talked about the priority crops for us in the US being strawberries and blueberries. And what's great is the season for those different crops started pretty much in November, and it will continue in the case of blueberries until May or June. So we've progressively started talking to growers, first in Florida, and then as the season kind of grows a little bit further north into Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and then ultimately Michigan and Pacific Northwest. So what's transpired in the last 3 months is we've pretty much now completed the season for growing strawberries in Florida, and that's gone extremely well. We actually sold out the allocation of beehives that we had.
Excellent.
So that was great news for us. And then going into the biggest opportunity for Georgia in blueberries, what's great there is we exceeded our own expectations. We were hoping to get sales from somewhere around 10 customers, 500 acres was what we were planning for. Well, once we started talking to these guys, the demand was such that we ended up now doing business with about 15 growers on about 700 acres. So it's quite a bit higher than we were hoping for. And we're really happy about that. The blueberry season is active right now for the next 3-4 weeks.
Wow.
And then we go on to Michigan and Pacific Northwest from there.
That's exciting. And so that's great. And I'm sure investors will look forward to seeing some news flow from sales there. But I think the interesting thing that I'd like to touch on, because we were talking, is your actual strategy around that. You guys run a pretty lean ship at BVT. So what you're looking to do is break into a lot of different markets and then try and grow through word of mouth. So can you talk a little bit about how that strategy is playing out, maybe some early success or even just how it works?
Yeah, so one of the things that we need to remember is that the conditions, so even if you take a crop like blueberries, which are grown in Florida, in Georgia, in Michigan, in New Jersey, in Oregon, Washington, of course, British Columbia, the conditions are very different. The varieties that farmers are growing are different. So just because you work in one growing region, you cannot translate that to the other region. So unfortunately, what that means is we have to do a lot of homework, right? So we have to work with the local growers in these different markets, with the universities, the extension agents that are actually doing the research in order to show the efficacy and what this technology can bring. So we do all that. We have to do that. We have done that. But then when you start getting into the sales cycle and pick a community like the Georgia blueberry growers, there's many. It's quite fragmented, right? So it's very difficult when unless you've got the $10 million marketing budgets that the Bayers or Syngentas of the world have. It's very difficult for a company our size to just kind of do a huge launch like that. So our strategy is much more focused on who are the key growers, and we really try to find those influential growers who work with the key brands, right? So the blueberries that you and I would go buy at a shop don't have the grower's name on it. It'll have Nature Ripe or Driscoll's, right? And those are basically branders, they're packers, and they will buy from a variety of growers. So you talk to growers that are selling through Nature Ripe or selling through Driscoll's, you get them comfortable with the technology, make sure that they have a positive experience, and then that'll translate into word of mouth extension within that organization. So that's our strategy. We the 10 or 15 growers we're working with, typically we'll get a percentage, 10-15% of their acreage in the first season, knowing that we service the heck out of them, they get a positive experience, they will buy more the next season, but most importantly, they will also bring other growers.
Yeah, they become the BVT brand evangelists. Exactly. Yeah, well, and I think that's a smart way when you're lean, you're kind of on a tight budget. But with that said, you guys have also had some pretty big success You've got a lot of recognition in the ag tech community. You've got a recognition from TSXV.
Yep.
I think that was announced today, releasing your top 50. So congratulations there.
Thank you.
But I think part of one of the ag tech award you sort of helped you get a foot in the door in Europe. And I know you guys have talked. You really want to be a global focused organization, not just North America. So can you talk about the importance of that and what you're hoping to do in Europe and why you think that's a big
absolutely.
market?
So there's two key events. So last year we actually also got recognized by industry peers, global industry peers, for innovation. So we actually received what's called the Agro Innovation Awards last October, and that was also announced. So that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Because that's, my peers, our industry peers recognized us, international. What you're referring to is an award that we got for a county in Switzerland, and that was late 2018 it would have been, where we were recognized as an innovative ag tech startup, and this region in Switzerland wanted to build a kind of an innovation center. So one of the nice things we got out of that award was access to their facility. So we've just moved into their facility. They're building an infrastructure of different labs, grower fields. They've got some farmers that are helping grow different crops that companies like ours can test our product in. Yeah. And so really it's an R&D center for the European region, starting in Switzerland first, but we expect that it'll be an innovation hub across the continent.
And will that help?
That's
super exciting. Yeah. And will that help you guys get approval in Europe faster? Is that how investors should think about this? Or is it more about, new IP?
I think it's more about proving that the technology works. It could help for the regulatory process within Switzerland.
Right.
But, remember that Switzerland is not part of the EU, so it's not going to help us with, Spain or Italy registrations. Yeah. But it will help show that our technology works in the European crops. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. And so, again, sticking with that global theme, you recently announced, relatively recently, sort of progress on the Mexican sort of commercialization. Yeah. So can you talk to investors about, where that stands and just quickly just where that needs to go, what might happen in 2020?
Yeah, so the first point there is Mexico is a tremendous opportunity. Yeah. And the reason for that is, it so happens that Mexico is actually taking acres away from the U.S. market. Yeah. So every year you see acres of strawberries and tomatoes and blueberries growing in Mexico, declining in the U.S. just because it's cheaper to produce those crops down there. The other thing to remember is that a lot of the crops they grow in Mexico are for export purposes into the U.S., into Canada. And so this point about residue management, I don't know if you recall, but we talked about we got an exemption from residue when we got our registration with the EPA, is very important to the Mexico growers. Because when they grow these crops, when they ship them into the U.S., they don't have to test for residues of clonostachys. So the market's kind of perfect for us. So then the question is, how do you get the license to operate? And that's where the regulatory process comes in. So we kicked the process off last year, did start doing our first set of trials with the Mexican environmental conditions. In Mexico, you have to do what are called official trials, which are government sanctioned, and they have to be approved by the government and done through a qualified researcher. So we just completed those. We're getting the reports written. They'll get kind of written up with the rest of the regulatory dossier, and we expect that the package will be submitted to the regulatory authorities later this year. I'm hopeful still for the first half of this year. And then that's the official submission to the Mexican
And then
government.
you think, obviously you have no control over the Mexican government, but you think it's possible 2020?
The feedback that we're getting is that 2020 is possible. Yeah. But there's a fair degree of variability. We have no control over it. Exactly.
Absolutely. And so that's obviously a huge catalyst for you guys in 2020, along with increasing sales. But you're a younger organization. I think since the financial statements were released, you've raised $2 million. Do you want to just talk, because early stage companies, cash balance, that runway is incredibly important. Do you just want to talk about your liquidity situation throughout 2020 and what you guys are looking at? Because obviously you are going to need more funding, whether that's, continuing the bridge funding, maybe starting to talk to institutions. What does that look like?
So that's, we have a high aspiration for BBT, right? And I think as we start developing Mexico, Europe, and ultimately Latin America and Asia, because we've got people that are interested in this technology for those markets also, that requires registrations, trials, sales, organization build out. All of those things will require capital, and so what we are building is a kind of a flexible business plan where we can either move very fast, which would require a larger raise up front, or we can kind of meter our growth a little bit, which would require sequential raises. So those are very active conversations that we're having, myself and the rest of my board. And the reality is we will need financing in 2020.
Yeah.
So the question is, like you said, is it going to be one big one, or is it going to be a smaller bridge to a bigger one? What's really cool, Evan, is that we are now beginning to have conversations with institutional funds.
Excellent.
And so we kind of turned that, and I think the catalyst there was the EPA registration last year.
Right.
And we're also beginning to talk to folks in the US. So we have some options.
Yeah.
And we just need to pick the right one.
Yeah, well, I mean, options are key. Hopefully you can reach that larger funding amount, because I think investors obviously want to see you guys go global as fast as possible.
Yeah.
But it'll also lower your cost of capital if you've got more people that you can turn to. So obviously 2020 is setting up to be a big year. Thank you for taking the time to chat. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Evan.